Hello and welcome back to the Brit Iron Podcast. Today we're going to run through the news for you guys. We're going to give the number 2 seed in our season preview series. We're also going to have a little fancy quickfire from Matt. And then we're going to finish off with the Matt and Sam head-to-head, where I've got a fun little quiz for them to see who can win this week. I believe it's currently 3-0.
Yep, 3-0.
Matt, if I'm correct in thinking.
God.
So it's got some catching up to do there, Sam. It's
Yep.
not looking too good for you.
Yep.
And of course, mentioned a few times now, joined by Matt and Sam. How are we doing on this lovely Tuesday evening, boys?
I'm doing really well, mate. I'm really looking forward to talking about this team. To be honest, I think obviously got quite a place in your heart, but there's a lot to talk about with our number 2 ranked team, and I'm looking forward to getting diving right into it.
Yeah, 100%. Couldn't agree more. I mean, I don't know if I call it lovely day. It's just rainy, it's grey, It's proper British weather outside, but at least we've got some good football to talk about.
I mean, I'm ginger. This is lovely weather for a ginger. Like, that's what I can't burn outside. So
James finally put the sun cream away.
I think it's a lovely day. Every day's a lovely day. That's all I'm saying. Positive
True that.
vibes. Someone else will send some positive vibes too. Ron Rivera, diagnosed with cancer this last week. So obviously, Brighton boys would like to send our best wishes to him.
Yep.
So no more news on that. Just best wishes to Ron Rivera.
Yeah.
And then we'll kick it off with the news. So, first news article of the week is surrounding COVID again. And it's around the false positive test that we've seen over the past week or so, I think it is now. So I think 77 tests in total have come back false positive. And this is where...
That's a roster.
Entire roster, right? That could have knocked out an entire team on that basis. But this is going on the basis that someone tests positive and then I believe they test negative straight away. Is that what this is?
Yeah, I mean... By the sound of it, I think there was like one lab or something that they were all getting sent off to, and there was some kind of mix-up in the lab, and there were a bunch of issues. Now, the reason that I kind of put this into the news when I was kind of thinking about what it was that we wanted to talk about in this week's news is that this worries me in the sense that, like, you saw it on Hard Knocks when Rex Ryan, I think his name's Sean Ryan.
Seth Ryan.
Seth Ryan. He's an assistant with the Chargers, and he gets his positive comeback, and they follow the procedure. Fair play to them. They do exactly what they're supposed to do. He quarantines, he goes home, everyone's notified, that they do everything they need to do. And then it comes back 36, or not even that, it's like 30 hours later. Turns out he doesn't have corona, and then suddenly you've lost a day and a half. Now that, to me, is just something that's so avoidable, but could really impact on the quality of football and impact on the outcomes of games. Now, to lose a day and a half in training camp is a day and a half in training camp, but when you're on... If you've got a short week because you're playing a Sunday night, then you've got a Thursday night game, and you lose a day and a half of a player or of a coach or of anyone in the team, that's potentially a third of your week's worth of prep for that game gone. And it just kind of worries me that this is a potential could happen. And if you get 30 people from one team that all come back as false positives, there'll be all this kerfuffle, and then 2 days later, actually no, they're fine, and no one's really going to know what to do.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's sort of 2 ways I'm looking at it, which, if it has to happen, and you are going to see this, I think you could probably put money on it when we got into all this testing, that there was going to be something like this. Obviously, it's a lot better it happens now, so they can figure out what's caused it, and hopefully get it straightened out and sort of almost use, because I think it was a New Jersey test lab, I think was location. Almost once they've figured out what happened, send that round to the other places teams are sending these samples and all learn from it, hopefully to help avoid it not happening in the season. But I see it with a little bit of, this just shouldn't happen. Like the amount of money in football and like the amount of prep they've had to do to make this happen. Like if this had gone wrong and this had been a whole team, you're looking at news headlines of cancelled the season.
Yeah.
Which, even that just for a day and a half before it realises, oh, sorry, false positive, is very damaging potentially.
I mean, you've got the flip side of, right, so if false positives can happen, does that mean that a false negative could happen? I mean, I'm not a scientist, so I don't know how all this works, but what happens if a false negative happens and someone suddenly is allowed to be in a building and around a team for a day or two before someone realises that actually they do have it, and suddenly you've got 100 people in an organisation that have all got it, and an entire team out, an entire organisation. Yeah. And that's kind of, I think, the crux of what's getting me a bit nervy about the season, because obviously as someone who follows the NFL very, very much in depth, I love it, and obviously we run a podcast, all that kind of thing. I just want there to be football, and if they can't get it right now, it doesn't fill me with confidence that it's going to be right in 2.5 weeks' time when football starts. Yeah. So yes, it's something we've got to deal with, and yes, everyone knows that it's the risk that's there. I'm just nervous.
Yeah, I think the one point on that is that could happen, but I don't think you would know it as a false negative or however you would word it, because it would just think, oh, they contracted it at the next round of at testing. Obviously, it's still going to have the same issue of it spreading. But I think the only reason you know this is because it's a positive test, and they get the rapid, I think they can do quicker tests, almost they get it back a day after, that they then do to follow up that, and that's what comes back negative. Yeah. So I think that's the worry, though. It's like, if someone comes in, they could have a whole day going everywhere.
Yeah.
Off of that same thing. But then again, you don't get the results same day. So someone could come in, test, then by the end of the day,
someone
they realise,
could have it
oh,
and still,
So it's a worry.
It's a tricky one. I suppose it's something that everyone knew that this is what we were going to be dealing with when 2 months ago, when it was like, right, yeah, there is going to be a football season. We're going to have things in place. I suppose nothing's actually changed. The only thing that this shows is that maybe the testing system isn't flawless.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. And we mentioned the team level, wiping out a whole team perhaps. Down to an individual level as well, this could completely ruin a chance at a guy's season, right? If he misses 2 weeks of training camp in a next man up league, this could completely ruin a rookie in particular. In general,
careers.
You know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. So it's a bit scary on that front that could happen, but it's a moving situation. So
that's COVID, baby.
That is COVID, baby.
That's one way to word it.
Wow, that's a phrase I've not heard before, but I'm sort of on board with it, so
it's a new one.
Fair play.
I think that's going to be my catchphrase going on. In fact, you know what? I think throughout the season, each week, I'll have a "That's COVID, baby" section, COVID baby segment, where I'll just run through all of the players that are missing or coaches. It'll be like, "That's COVID, baby."
I can see it on a T-shirt now.
Just like Zeke out for 1 week. That's COVID, baby.
I'm on board with it. I can see that being a nice little feature. So
Well, guess we got that named then.
Yeah, you got the listeners will have to listen to future episodes to see.
Get behind me on this one, guys. Get behind me on this one.
But moving swiftly on to the second and actual final news piece for this week is about this guy. Oh, that one. There we are. Earl Thomas. I mean, threw a punch in training and has now been dismissed, sacked by the Ravens organisation. Is no longer part of the Ravens organisation. He's a free agent. It's not a great one, is it, really?
So I think with this, you hear it does happen. Like, little scuffles, fights. Sometimes even, like, players going to the floor, but in practice. I know just from, I tuned to the Bucks practice more, there's been a couple. But full on just, I think, throwing a, like, actually swinging a punch at someone, going something like that, it's got a different sort of, it's a different bit of aggression about it, but I don't think that's enough. I feel like we maybe haven't heard the full story on this. I mean, it might be entirely, and it might just be a case of the Ravens are saying, look, we don't have time to deal with any of this. This is already a limited off-season. This is a chance we're in an incredible window before we have to pay Lamar Jackson astronomical money, potentially. We can't afford any distractions. We are there to be in the Super Bowl, and we don't need you, who's going to be a leader on the team, causing issues like this. Because in my thing, if he's going to turn and throw a punch during practice, what's he being like in sort of the positional rooms? What's he being like in the huddle, like different situations? Is he being just to a small level disruptive as well there. So I
Well,
think
this is the thing. This is what's come out recently. Is that
Sends a message as well, doesn't it?
a lot of people have been saying that he isn't really a part of the group, the defensive group, and he doesn't really want, or didn't really want to be a part of the defensive group. The guy who he punched, I think it's Chuck Clark, is his name.
It was another safety, which was the thing which is what I think could be the big thing. It's like every year with the modern day and age, where now we're really lucky in the sense that we've got All or Nothing and we've got Hard Knocks, and we do get an insight. And like you said, it's not uncommon to see scraps on the field in training. I mean, whether you're on the same team or not, you've got an offense against a defense in full pads going at. Even if they're going at 80%, these are 80% of some of the best athletes in the world. That's like if all of us were lined up going at 150%. There's a lot of aggression and a lot of testosterone going. So yes, there will be aggression being thrown about. But he's hit someone on the same side of the ball as him. This is someone that's not only a teammate in the sense of we play for the same organisation, but they're a teammate on the defensive team, the defensive side of the ball. So that would suggest that maybe this isn't something that, like, you're in the heat of the moment in a play and you've lost your cool. This might suggest that there was something a bit darker and a bit more just unpleasant behind the situation. Yeah. And given everything that's happened, and because of that, it looks like they're going to be able... They have cut him, but it looks like they're going to be able to do that without kind of taking a cap penalty, and they won't have to pay him either because they can apply to not have it's like detrimental conduct towards the team. So rather than being like a 22 million cap hit for them, he's going to be nothing, which is brilliant for them. It means they can send a message that no one player is bigger than the team, which is brilliant for them. It can send the message of, look, we're here to win. It doesn't matter who you are. That's our goal. And it means they can do that at little to no cost.
I think the interesting thing with that is, though, it's all got to go through sort of a hearing. I imagine this is all on video, and it's probably going to be quite cut and dry, but it's still got to happen. But I think that's one thing that's going to be there in the background for the Ravens, and potentially even for like Chuck. Like, I don't know how that'll work if certain players have got to be involved with it and sort of with giving statements or that sort of thing. But also, if you're going to be a team that's looking to sign Earl Thomas, that's going to be going on at the same time. But also with everything coming out, and do you want to bring a player like that in? Obviously he's talented, but is it worth it? Because I think the league's starting to wake up to this, that disruptive players aren't always worth it. If it's going to completely like throw off the balance in your roster, because a lot of the teams that are going to be signing him and that he's going to want to go to are teams that are looking to win, and you can't risk that. A team that's on the lower end and just wants to try and have a run at a spot, they might take that risk. But then is he going to want to play there? So I think it's going to be interesting to see where he ends up, or how many sort of opportunities he's offered.
I can see two teams giving him an opportunity in the league. I can see Dallas giving him the shot because Jerry Jones he's happy to take on a diva. He'll happy pay him on a 1-year deal and kind of put up with that because Jerry Jones wants the talent. Mm-hmm. And I can see Belichick taking him on and putting him on a deal that is all incentive based and is easy to get out of like that. And you bring him in and you say, look, you show up, you work your behind off, and we will pay you, and you will play, and you will be part of what could be a championship defense. But the first sign of trouble, and you are gone. And it's not the first time that Belichick's done similar things. It won't be the last. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But he's the kind of guy who wouldn't necessarily be afraid of doing it.
I think the interesting thing with that is obviously all the cap room that the Pats have freed up. And I think this was something I saw on Twitter just after, I think, Hightower and a couple of others all came out saying they were sitting out, was that I think it was around the mid-20s, roughly, is what the cap room was being estimated to be. So that could potentially line up. I hadn't even thought of them as a spot. But because I know the Cowboys haven't sort of, I think, put anything in place. They've come out, there's sort of been all the talk that they're the leader. Yeah. But there hasn't been anything concrete on that yet. I think maybe a lot of teams are waiting to be like, is there anything else going to come out about this over the next week?
Well, this is the thing. Like, I think teams would be unwise to jump on him right now. Early things that have come out of the Ravens organization is that, like, he's been shown up not ready for practice, which is a bit of a red flag.
Yep.
He's missed meetings already this season, another red flag. Again, hitting Chuck Clark, but Chuck Clark is considered a leader within the Ravens defense locker room, so that's another red flag. Like, it would take a real team that wants
Really
a balance of
him.
talent and culture. Yeah, whereas the Ravens, this is definitely heading towards culture over talent. But my follow-up question for this is, how much does this really affect the Ravens defense? Is it a huge loss, or I think it's Deshaun Elliott is the guy to step up, who's a young third-year safety. If he, a few health issues in the past.
It's a big loss, but I think luckily they're a defense that don't just revolve around one name. I think there's enough there as a defense, and just the identity of the Ravens a lot of the time for years. It's a very defensive kind of franchise, if that makes sense. So I think through the coaching staff and through just the identity of that organization, this isn't enough to derail it. I think obviously it is going to hurt them, and sometimes there's going to be some moments on the field where you think, if he was there, that doesn't happen. But I think for the whole, maybe this is more in sort of our sort of season preview for them. I don't think it changes how I'm predicting them for the year at all.
Yeah, I don't think it changes how I'd predict probably their wins, losses, stuff like that. I think it is a massive loss for them. I think it makes them much more vulnerable to the kind of big play, and it makes them more vulnerable over the top. Like when you lose Earl Thomas, who is a Hall of Fame level safety, that is a massive loss. Like, it's not like you've got another guy who's going to be an all-pro who's just going to step in. Yes, they're a very well-coached defense. I think the fact that might be an issue as well, considering I don't expect their run game to be as dominant as it was last year, just because I think it's very rare that you have teams that, like, when you come out, and I think they broke the single-season rushing record for a team. Like, when it's a once in a generational type rushing offense. Yeah. Now, when you have that gives you great control over the ball, which keeps your defense off of the field. When you're able to do that kind of, it enables a defense that, yes, while they're a very good defense, the less time they're on the field, it kind of helps their stats look better because they give up less yards. They do stuff like that just because they're not on the field as much, which is brilliant. So I think a combination of losing Earl Thomas and maybe the run game regressing slightly. I still think they'll probably be the best rushing team in the league, just maybe not as good as they were last year, especially in that division now. Like, you've got the Steelers defense working up to being maybe the best defense in the league. You've got a really, really scary Cleveland front seven. I think it will affect them. I still think they're going to go 13-3 and be one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the league, and we will probably see them in the AFC Championship game. But I could see them losing 1 or 2 more games to silly, big, over-the-top plays, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, potentially. But as we alluded to there, that is a nice way to round us in to our season preview, which of course is the Baltimore Ravens. We've got them at number 2 in our rankings. So by now you should be able to guess who's number 1 if you've watched all of our season preview videos thus far. However, Ravens,
which you should have done.
Of course,
they're all there in a playlist on YouTube if you haven't. So get caught up.
They are fire.
Most of them, I'd say. There's a few dodgy teams in there. So
granted, yes.
But Ravens 13-3. I know me and you, Sam, we had them at 13-3, and Matt, I believe you had them a bit higher at 14-2, but averaged out around 13-3.
Yep.
So not a bad record to have. I've seen a few people in the industry say that maybe they should be a bit higher than that. I think Colin Coward maybe came out and said 16-0 was definitely on the cards in his eyes. For the Ravens.
Yeah, but that's like every year there's probably 2 or 3 teams that you could come out and go, well, 16-0's on the cards.
But what I mean is they're highly thought of, highly ranked. So this is a good spot for us, I believe. And as a Ravens fan, happy to see him at this point.
I think quickly for me on that note, when I was thinking of it having 14-2, my kind of mindset on that was that the floor is 12-4, the ceiling is 16-0. Like if I now had to put money on a team to go 16-0 this year,
really,
maybe Earl Thomas swings it slightly, but I think for me personally, I think it would be the Ravens. I just think Lamar Jackson, this is me thinking he's going to continue MVP level form, but develop a little bit more. So there's a little bit more of a passing attack, gets a bit better in that front. So I think for me personally, I think this is the team I'd be putting money on to go 16-0 for me.
Interesting. I would not. I would not. I would actually say that of our top 3 teams, these guys are the most boom bust. So yes, they could they could go 16-0 and that, but I think their floor is actually quite a bit lower than what you're saying. I think their floor could be a 10-6 team or a 9-7 team. Ooh, where they come out and if Lamar Jackson. Yeah, no, I'm being perfect. No, but I'm being perfectly honest. Yes, we saw Lamar Jackson kind of come out and light it up last year, but there are still questions around how good he is in the pocket and how as it's just a pure passing quarterback. If teams can figure out how to contain him and keep him in the pocket, there is the possibility that the number of points that they're scoring is reduced considerably. If that kind of run game regresses, you could see their average points per game go down massively. If the defense is just a little bit worse, and I think that you could kind of see the defense drop a little bit, the offense drop a little bit, but then suddenly they're just in a way harder division. The Bengals this year are going to be a much better team. The Steelers are going to be a much, much better team. And the Browns are going to be as good or should be better than they were last year. That's a lot of games that if you... And they dropped a game to the Browns last year? They lost to the Browns?
Yeah, it was last year, yeah.
So I think there's a very real chance that if people can figure out how to contain Lamar Jackson, whilst I don't think he's a one-dimensional quarterback like a number of people would have said this time last year, I think that if they could contain him to 750 rushing yards on a season, that could quite easily be a 9-7, 10-6 team, if you know what I mean.
I think I'll let you go.
I think there's too many if buts and maybes there to put the Ravens that floor that low. And maybe a couple of if buts maybes you'd be like, okay, potential, but there's so many different things you're waiting to happen or could happen for them to be a 9-7 or 10-6 team. And the other thing as well is Lamar Jackson's been working on his arm this offseason. So albeit he might not be able to, if he can't rush as much, his ability to throw has improved this offseason.
Yeah.
And I think the receiver core this year is a
much
little bit
better.
better. Is better.
It's much better. I think I'm probably phrasing what I mean poorly. I don't mean that I foresee that happening. I still foresee them being a 13-3 team. But I'm saying of our top 3 teams, obviously we have the Niners ranked at 1. We've got the Ravens at 2, and we've got the Chiefs at 3.
Oh god, that's a shock.
Of the 3 of them, the most obvious path to me to being a worse team than we foresee them is the Ravens, because I think they rely so heavily on having that commanding run game in a similar way that I think the Titans, maybe not as heavily as the Titans, and they're a much better team than the Titans, but I could see that happening, whereas I think that Chiefs offense is too dynamic and too good that I can't see them losing less than 10 games. I think the defense of the Niners is so good that I can't see them losing less than 10 games. There is a world that I could see the Ravens potentially losing. Sorry, I'm saying losing. I'm
assuming you meant winning. Yeah.
I meant winning.
I was like, whoa.
I could see a world in which the Ravens go 9-7. That it'd be very unlucky on couple coin flip games that don't quite go their way, and a bit of a fall apart game here or there. But I think their floor is a bit lower than those teams.
I think the big thing for me on it is it's a very different conversation of defenses scheming and figuring out the Ravens. It's one thing to think on paper and on the practice field you've got them figured out. It's another to actually have your defense go out there and stop, if he does play to even the same level as last year, or even a tiny bit lower but with a bit better of an arm. It's a whole nother thing to go out there and actually stop Lamar Jackson in this offense compared to practicing for it, scheming for it. And I reckon there's only a handful of defenses in the league that on a day could. And I think even then it's still a case of they've got to have a day. Like, if the offense doesn't drop off, if this is the last season's offense from the Ravens, maybe even slightly less running and a little bit more of an arm from Lamar Jackson, I think it's going to take a hell of a defensive performance to stop it. But I think it's, as you said, I think as well, your first point on it was calling them sort of they could be boom or bust. I think the only way you get 16-0 is a boom season. You can't get more of a boom season than that. And I just think this is the kind of team that, if I had to put money on a boom season in the regular season,
I would agree.
That's where I'm leading.
I'm taking Pat Mahomes. I'm taking Pat Mahomes every day.
Nah, I'm agreeing. Lamar, that run game, but improved arm. Hollywood Brown, better than last season already. Need I say, James Prochet.
There it is.
So, I mean, all jokes aside, that wide receiver room is better. J.K. Dobbins has looked good in practice thus far.
Yep.
He's made some big plays. I think all-out offense is better, and that is helped a lot by that arm of Lamar Jackson improving.
A lot of snaps freed up for Andrews as well, which could be massive.
Yeah.
A lot of snaps. I mean, okay, he was the leading target share, but I mean, he was still only on the field 50% of the time. Like, Hayden Hurst was on the field a lot last year.
Yeah.
He might not have got the targets or run as many routes and stuff like that, but I mean, if Mark Andrews goes up to 70, 80% of snaps from 50, suddenly you've got a guy that you could be talking in that kind of Kittle and Kelsey bracket of the elite at tight end.
Yeah.
What do we make of the first round pickup as well of Patrick Queen at the linebacker position?
I think it could turn out to be a very, very solid pickup. I think he's a player that could have gone a little bit higher. I think the second you see a defensive player like that going to the Ravens, could be a very nice match. I don't think you can criticise it really.
Yeah.
One of
a lot of people.
Look at you.
A lot of people say that he was one of the steals of the draft.
Yeah.
I think he was probably at that spot for what they needed. He was probably one of those players that Harbaugh and the entire staff were sat about going, "How the hell has he dropped to us here? Yep. We never expected that." They probably had it picked before they were even on the clock. Like, we're taking this guy if he's there.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Mail it in. Let's all have a beer and clock off until tomorrow because that's easy. Done. So there's not much to say there. I mean, obviously he's a rookie. He could be a complete bust. You've seen it before, but he's about as close to being just, that is a really solid first round pick, and he will have instant impact on that defense.
So improved defense then, definitely. With Calais Campbell as well. Improved offense. That's the one thing.
Calais Campbell might be on the... He's on the kind of the borderline of his career. It will be interesting to see because, for all we know, Earl Thomas is at that age that he could fall off a cliff this year anyway. So it's hard to tell. I would imagine this defense will be as good as last year at least because they've got the quality of personnel there. And at the end of the day, one of the things that a lot of people don't always talk about when they talk about teams is this is one of the best coached teams in the NFL. John Harbaugh, in my opinion, is one of the best NFL coaches. That's why he's been there for so long. He's won a Super Bowl, and he's consistently in the mix.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's what I alluded to earlier. Just I have faith in this franchise, even without Thomas, with these picks, they're gonna be well coached, and the identity of this team just has been a just solid defense, a top tier defense, and.
Yep.
Now they've got the offense to match it.
Exactly.
Which is a scary thought.
Mm-hmm.
So, better offense, arguably better defense, 16-0. You heard it here first. It's happening. But moving on to the fantasy side of things, and we'll stick on the Lamar Jackson front. Now, top 3, top 2 quarterback for fantasy? Top 1, maybe he's your number 1.
I think, with that running base, for me, Pat Mahomes is a fantasy monster. Lamar Jackson, if he stays healthy, has slightly more risk to his game, is a fantasy monster. But that running baseline, especially in this season where there's a lot of uncertainties, I kind of I would prefer that. So if I wanted to take my quarterback in the 3rd round and really wanted to go for one of these guys, I'm taking Jackson before Mahomes personally. Yeah. But that is a complete personal preference pick, I think, for anyone. Yeah. But I think, if you want to take an early quarterback and you're happy to, and it can work out, there is some deep talent, then I think he's your guy. But you're not taking him any earlier than the 3rd.
Yeah, Lamar Jackson.
There is some drafts where him and Mahomes go stupid early, end of the 1st, during the 2nd. No, that is too early.
That's a silly home league that you've got people that don't play fantasy in. When it comes to the decision between Mahomes and Jackson, I think Matt kind of summed it up really nicely when he said that it's like Jackson is the boom guy. If you're in a redraft league and you want to kind of reach for a quarterback and take your guy in the 3rd round, I don't have an issue with that. But in my opinion, if you're reaching for a quarterback, you got to reach for the guy who has just been the MVP and has just broken the all-time rushing record for a quarterback, because that's going to get you a lot of points.
Yeah.
The thing with Jackson, which is again why I might be more wary of taking him, is I think he's got as opposed to Mahomes, Mahomes might have one of these silly weeks where he puts up like 20 passing touchdowns because he's Patrick Mahomes, and there's no way of predicting that. But he will probably consistently put up 250 to 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, and is going to be consistently very, very good. Lamar Jackson might have 5 or 6 just insane weeks where he throws 4 touchdowns. He might only throw 200 yards, but he rushes for 121, and he's one of the highest scoring quarterbacks in history or something on that given week. But he's got a much greater chance of having 1 or 2 just utter bust weeks where the offense doesn't get rolling, so they're just relying on the run game and good defense. He doesn't get the ball that many carries, and they're just handing it off and playing great defense. And that could happen, and I foresee that more just because of how good their running backs are. They could hand the ball off 30, 40 times in a game if they wanted, with strong defense and just pounding running game. And if that, why put your star quarterback in risk of getting hit if that's working? You just don't have to. Sure, yeah. And I don't think Lamar Jackson would even care. He's very much the kind of guy, as long as he wins, I don't think he cares, which is brilliant. From a football standpoint, that's what you want your quarterback to be like. But I would err towards avoiding Jackson personally, just because I don't want to reach. But if you're going to take one in the 3rd round, it's him.
It's got to be him. It's got to be him. And you mentioned running backs there, Sam, as well. Obviously, this is a running back room with a few talented players, but in particular, Ingram and J.K. Dobbins as well. If you're an Ingram owner, like I am, does this J.K. Dobbins pickup concern you, or should it concern you, perhaps?
I think to an extent, anytime you bring in another young running back to a room like that, but one that is expected, isn't just like a right at the end of the draft just to fill out the room there in case. This is a guy that's been making plays already in practice and has been brought in to compete and to be relevant for them within this offense. It's worrying, I think, because if he comes out and he's making highlight plays in games, you see the target share start to slip and the carries are going different places, and it starts to become a difficult thing you're predicting who's going to break that playoff, who's going to get in the end zone, who's going to be the guy sort of getting those goal line carries, and you could end up with a situation where they're both worse than they would be in other places because they're kind of time sharing. So I think it would concern me until you kind of see how it develops, and you've got to see how it works out. But I think it's definitely a little bit of a red flag.
Yeah, this strikes me potentially kind of like the situation a couple of years back with Ingram and Alvin Kamara in New Orleans, where I think you're going to see Ingram at the start of the season, Ingram will be the feature back, I think. Just because he's earned the right to be.
Yeah.
And he had a great year last year, and he's earned the right to start the season as a feature back. As the season goes on, I think between the 20s at least, you will see J.K. Dobbins just work his way in and slowly take control, similarly to how Kamara did.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, even last year, Ingram, he's not going to be a massive yardage guy. He never has been. Where you get your points out of him is on the goal line, and he's one of the best goal line backs in the league. And behind that offensive line, I think he will be the goal line guy, even at the end of the season. As long as he stays healthy, he's getting the goal line carries. So there will be value in both running backs at some point in the season, I think, because you'll have Dobbins will be between the 20s and the kind of the receiving back, but on the goal line, it will be Ingram. The one thing I would say is I wouldn't be looking for either of these guys to be a running back 1 or 2. I would say maybe borderline running back 2 if you're kind of struggling, but I wouldn't expect week in, week out top 24 performances from either of them.
No, I think you've got to think about it as well. One of the leading rushers is Lamar Jackson on that team. He takes away from running backs. So yeah, I think the share they're already splitting, like the point share you could talk about it as for rushing yards for the Ravens, there's a chunk out of that already to Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
So it limits the ceiling on these guys anyway. And there will be weeks where they put up good numbers, and there will be weeks where one of them does eventually get into being a running back 1 on the week. I think consistently I wouldn't want to be predicting it. And I think there's going to be a lot of uncertainty, and it's going to be, I don't know. I personally, I would, in redraft especially, I think I'm probably avoiding this running back room for this season.
Yeah, I definitely would as well now. Makes me a bit nervous owning Ingram on our Dynasty League as well. And 2 other names we didn't really mention there is Gus Edwards and Justice Hill, who were Ravens, with the Ravens last season, and did steal a few snaps away from Ingram as it was. So adding another talented name is just going to further enhance that issue for Ingram, I believe. So,
interesting thing with that though is with Gus Edwards, I think his name was being thrown about in a sort of trade context as part of a deal from Gokwe, which that's kind of gone quiet again. But that's still up until trade deadline. That could still come about. So I think that's one to watch, especially because I know in a team that's going to run the ball quite often, there is going to be value in guys throughout the weeks. And it's one of those things that sometimes if you see one of these other guys like Mark Ingram get injured, suddenly Gus Edwards is like a trending player on Sleeper and all this sort of thing. Be a little bit careful if you see certain storylines in training camps. Just bear in mind there's uncertainty around him as what you could think is a steal in a if you've got a deep roster. He's one that even more so just ignoring. Even if I saw potentially that Mark Ingram's questionable or J.K. Dobbins is questionable, I think just because you don't know if he's going anywhere, I think if you end up in Jacksonville, it's even. He's not getting any more relevance. So I think it's just to throw it about with that name.
Just finally quick touching on the running backs, J.K. Dobbins in particular. This is a very much a dynasty thing to consider, but Dobbins, whilst in college, got a lot of work. Lot of work. A lot of carries, a lot of touches of the ball. That is something that I would consider going forward because I mean, people often like to talk about throughout how many career carries of running backs had, and coming into the league, how many did they have in college? And just for longevity, sometimes college running backs that were explosive in college and had less carries do last a little longer. I'm not saying don't just forget about him, but it is something to bear in mind. If he had a lot of carries in college, and then it comes out that by the end of this year he is the feature guy in an offense that wants to run the ball a lot, that's something to consider.
Yeah, very true, very true.
Definitely keep that in mind. Right, moving it across to the wide receiver room. Mention a few big names, or a few names, I should say rather, in that room. But Marquise Brown in particular, whereabouts are you valuing him for fantasy?
It's hard to say for me. I think I want to see him play because he's packed on a lot of muscle in the off-season, like an unusual amount of muscle.
23 pounds, I think.
Yeah, that is a lot. That's like to the point that people are starting to say, well, can he play at the same level because he's now got a kind of a different build. I don't know enough about that kind of thing. I'm not a sports scientist. I don't know like where you put on the weight and stuff, how much that would affect him. But you do see it in players. They come in packing 20 pounds more, and they're different players. Now maybe he's the kind of player who adapts to that well, and with his new build, he kind of adds to his game. Yeah, he might get a little slower because he's 20 pounds heavier, but suddenly he's better over the middle, stuff like that. But I would want to wait and see how he is as a player. He'll still have fancy relevance because he's the number one receiver on that team. But for me, I just want to see how he develops. And I also don't think he's actually the number one receiver on that team. The number one receiver on that team is effectively Mark Andrews at this point, I think. Yeah. So I would be wary of drafting Brown to be a number one or high-end number two receiver for fantasy. But I think he'll be a consistent number two, low-end.
There's parallels to this just in the play style and I guess the ability to an extent of Tyreek Hill. And just he's a big play guy. He's going to at points just break off a couple runs during a week that's going to be week winning. And I think we've already said, I think it kind of mirrors that discussion of I'm happy to lean towards that. Sam, I think less so generally. You sort of, especially where he's going, not as high as Tyreek Hill, but there's still going to be other options that I think give you potentially a more consistent, maybe a second wide receiver slot, maybe a locked-in flex slot of you know what you're getting. But I think Dynasty, he's a guy that I'd 100% be looking to pick up.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. And I think in redraft, it would really depend how my draft's fallen. I think if I'm picking towards the middle of a draft, so I'm going to be able to lock up some decent running back talent early on, and then maybe pushing back where I'm picking my receivers, looking more towards him. If I'm picking more right at the end on the turn, where I'm normally going to end up with maybe an early name at receiver, maybe two, maybe less so. So I think for me, it's a really draft-dependent one. I think it's a name that there is absolutely... I don't think anything against drafting him. Just know you might get burnt some weeks, but other weeks you might win.
Fifth round? Fourth, fifth round?
Yeah, I'd say that.
I mean, if fair. You go... If I went 2 running backs, and then I got a grade A top... Like a grade A number one, or obviously you're not going to get that if you go 2 running backs early. In the third round, you'll be able to get someone who is going to be on the verge of that wide receiver one thing week in, week out. I would then be happy taking him as my number 2 receiver who's got massive upside. Yeah. But I think he's also got massive downside. Not necessarily because of the player, but also just because of the offense he plays in. When Matt just said he compared him to Tyreek Hill, I'd take Tyreek Hill over him every single day of the week. Not because I think there's that much different in talent, just because for the deep threat, I'm taking Patrick Mahomes to throw at 80 yards over Lamar Jackson to throw at 80 yards because no one's arguing over the arm strength and the deep threat. So I think 4th round is where I'd start to consider him. 5th round would be where I'd be most comfortable to pull the trigger on him.
Yeah, I'll definitely agree with that. Is there any other names in that wide receiver room that take your fancy?
I mean, fantasy-wise, no. But sure. I know that you want to say James Prochet because you love James Prochet. I don't think he's
Dynasty only, that one.
Yeah.
Even
being
then,
realistic.
Even Dynasty. Then, Dynasty, like unless you picked him up and you've got one of these taxi squads and you just want to hold on to him, don't hold him on your roster because he was a late round pick. He might not have any fantasy relevance this year, and he's the kind of guy that, okay, if he pops up, then you splurge your fab on him. That's what fab's there for. But I can see upside for Prochet is 200-300 yards, and he's a good guy, a good kind of possession catch guy, so maybe there's 4 touchdowns on the season, but I wouldn't expect any fantasy value from this season especially, and you'd be able to pick him up off the waiver wire if it looks like he did.
I think, that's the one thing to watch out for, is a guy who, he's had that, I think the one highlight play come out from practice so far, and seems like he's kind of continuing to be a reliable pair of hands. In a season where you don't know what could happen, you could have 2 receivers suddenly sitting out. This is a name to keep track of because it is going to be a lesser talked about one. That if you hear that maybe, I don't know, Marquise Brown's injured or Willie Snead's injured, the other suddenly goes down COVID, maybe even a false positive. has to sit out for a game, then yeah, grab him with your fab, because I think he's an under the radar name in that regard. And I think in Dynasty, if you've got a deep enough bench and you're happy with where your squad's at, and you like him, you like the name, you like the fit, he's a guy you could pick up and stash, and maybe you're gonna have just to sit him there for a year and a half before he properly becomes relevant in your rotation. Fine. But I think it's a name to consider and bear in mind. It's not one that I'd be completely opposed to with a very, very late pick.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. You can stash him in Dynasty. I wouldn't look at him this year at all in a redraft, but for Dynasty, I'd stash him if I have stashed him actually, because our bench is big enough, but not for this year. Perhaps for next year or the year after at worst. So I think it's a name worth bringing up because it's a name to watch out for. A very talented young man, I have to say. Albeit probably 2 years younger than me, but still counts. Okay, moving on from wide receivers. Tight end. Now, this is a room that has been stacked for a few seasons now. Obviously, Sam is talking about Nick Boyle there, a guy I am high on. Although all jokes aside, Nick Boyle is a very talented player, but the guy that Sam is talking about, of course, Mark Andrews.
Yeah. I know I actually said draft him, but actually it's probably better to not draft him, just because I for where someone's going to... I can see very much people will draft Kelsey and Kittle, and there'll be someone that panics and goes, oh my God, I need a tight end, and then they'll reach to get hold of Andrews, because Andrews is kind of in this weird level now where you've got the two guys, you've got Mark Andrews, and then you've got that next tier beneath.
He's that tier in between the rest of the guys.
I'm less sold on Ertz just with injuries.
And ADP wise, that's the tier. They're that tier down, but I think really, Ertz is more. I could see him dropping down to the tier below. Andrews, I think actually could step up and become on a par with him. That next year you're saying they all go at the same round with him, Kittle and Kelsey. But personally, I'd rather draft Andrews than Kittle or Kelsey, just because you're going to get him probably 2 rounds later, depending on how the league drafts and if people are getting a bit panicky.
Yeah.
Like if they're going third, you should be able to get him probably around 5th, end of the 4th into the 5th, which if you're going to tighten that early, you just want to lock and load your tight end sorted for the year. Around that range, I'm not actually opposed to taking him on. I could happily take that because I think you've already locked in. If you're getting him, let's say the 5th, you've already locked in a lot of important starters. Even in the 4th, you can have RB1, RB2, wide receiver 1, or even RB3, depending on how you do it. And then you grab your tight end, which is a very sometimes difficult to fill position, because outside of the big names, you're taking a bit of a swing. And there's a lot of places you can get burnt, still putting in draft capital in around the 7th or 8th. So I think for me, that middle ground, I think Mark Andrews is probably the only tight end I'm taking before the 7th or 8th. And
the only thing I would...
the 4th, 5th for me.
The only thing I would say about this, and this again I think comes down to kind of the different philosophies that me and Matt have when it comes to fantasy football, and I'm very much I've seen someone do it for one season. Brilliant. And yes, they're set to make the jump. But Travis Kelce's been the number 1 tight end in football for 4 years on the trot. Kittle's just been paid a load of money and has put 2 years on the trot. I would be much happier taking them because I know 100% for a fact they are both going to get loads of targets, loads of yards, loads of touchdowns.
So even at their ADP, you've taken all these players at their ADP.
Yeah, I actually would rather take those guys because I think they're 100% a lock. There is more of a chance that Mark Andrews busts this year for his ADP, and he is suddenly the number 5 tight end on the season, then I think that Kittle or Kelsey aren't the top 2 guys.
Fair enough.
Which is realistically for that ADP, I want the return, and I think the dip once you go below those top 2 guys is to the point that if you're then taking Andrews and you're panicking and you're getting him at his ADP and then he doesn't pay off, I'm really, really hacked off. And I think that's more likely than if I took Kittle or Kelsey at their ADP and they just bust.
True. Just in general, maybe in a fantasy football context, I think once you get out of those first 4 rounds, you're starting. It's a little bit of a swing on players you're taking because you're getting some of the players who used to be talented that aren't now a top 4, like first 4 round player. But also you're kind of in that blend as well of young players who you haven't seen enough of with it yet. So I think that's just the difference to me is I kind of expect that from round 5 onwards, there is uncertainty to almost every pick you make.
Yeah.
You're making your first 4 picks, you're building your team on that. You're then fleshing out with everything else. So I just think, I don't know, I guess it is, just different philosophies, different ways of looking at fantasy football.
Yeah, it does certainly seem that way. Right, unless there's any other players you guys want to mention on this team.
You're not going
you're going to mention it. You're going to mention it, but I want to
say no.
I want to mention.
Of course, there's a player.
This is the one time I'll jump in for the brand as well.
Of course, there's a player we need to mention now, and that is Justin Tucker.
Yep,
at the
he's
kick
really
position.
good. He's really good at kicking footballs.
Number one,
he's up there in that.
Yeah.
I think he's probably one of the safer ones you're gonna. When you get to that last 2 rounds, you're gonna be taking. You're drafting a kicker.
He's the best kicker in the league.
Safe, yeah.
Like he just is.
If you're going to be the first to take a kicker, you should be the first because it's the least, I guess, risk to it. It's the most, you know what you're getting.
He is the GOAT. That's all I'm saying.
And
he's
I think
working towards it.
Adam Vinatieri might beg to differ, but he's on his way.
Can't help but. I've got to agree with that, unfortunately, yeah. I was trying to find a way to disagree, but no, yeah. Definitely agree with that opinion. Right, then that would...
defense as well, though. One to touch on. It's a defense you take him. I think it's in that conversation, same as a lot of the ones at this end of the board. That once defenses start rolling, this could even be the first, depending on who's in your league. It's going to be in or around that top 5 that are getting taken, I think. So if you want to draft a defense, you can feel comfortable with this one.
Yep, 100% agree. And like I said earlier, I believe it's better than last season. So make of that what you will, but yeah. Definitely agree with that. However, I believe that's all the points we have on the Ravens for our season preview. So that leads us very nicely, Matt, into your fantasy quickfire section. Lead us the way.
Right then. So today we're going on the topic of running backs, and for this coming season, there's a lot of big name running backs playing in contract years. The landscape of the NFL in terms of the running back position could look very different in 12 months' time, depending on where some of these running backs land. I've picked out 3 that I want to talk about, and the sort of the general context for this is a half PPR dynasty league. So, out of these 3 names I'm going to give you, who would you rather have locked into your roster for the next 3 years? That means you can't drop them, you can't trade them, you can't bench. They are locked in unless obviously injury and stuff, but they're locked in. It's a locked and loaded running back. And the 3 names I'm giving you: Todd Gurley, I'm just currently with the Falcons, 25. Kenyon Drake for the Cardinals, 24. And Kareem Hunt with the Browns, also 24. Sam, who's your locked and loaded? Yep, knew that.
Todd Gurley is he's a complete swing every week. He could have a week where looks like the best running back in the league, and then suddenly a flare up in the knee, and he's not playing the next week. He is the best running back, the most talented running back out of the 3. No one is going to argue that. But he's the most talented, I think. But he's not the most. He's the least reliable from a health standpoint, because even if he's not taking hits and he's doing everything right, his knee could just decide to stop working for 3 weeks, and you lose that. Yeah. So, and it's not predictable. It's all over the shop. I don't want anything of that. I then think Kenyon Drake is actually just a more talented back than Kareem Hunt. I think he's better. I think he's in a better scenario where he's got a very young, dynamic quarterback who... I don't want to say that Kyler is better than Baker, because they're both still very young in their NFL careers. And you could argue that Kyler kind of has just the perfect system for him, whereas Baker's had all sorts of movement or whatever. But I think Kenyon Drake is more talented than Kareem Hunt, in a better scenario for him, and he's not got Nick Chubb in front of him. at the moment. Obviously, I know things have changed, but I think Kenyon Drake's just better than Kareem Hunt.
James?
So I really want to disagree, but I can't help but agree with every single word you just said there, Sam. Sort of stole my... Wait, can I pick the same as Sam, or is this?
Yeah, mate. It's
good.
Whatever name we want.
Because I would definitely pick Kenyon Drake as well. I mean, I can't add much more to what Sam said. Obviously, Todd Gurley, my concerns around the knee, the longevity of his career in general. Across 3 years, I think you said, question marks around his production. Obviously very talented, but yeah, if he's not on the field, then I don't really want a piece of that. Kareem Hunt, although he does scare me a little bit as a Chubb owner in Dynasty, Chubb is still the main guy in Cleveland, I believe. So I have my question marks over Kareem Hunt when I'm tending to pick Drake, unless, of course, Hunt would get traded. Or Hunt was to be on another team. Well, this is the
question. They're all open for contract at the end of the year. You're all both assuming that everyone's staying put.
Okay.
Which I think, for me, Todd Gurley's first name crossed out. Injury concerns me too much. Planning 3 years in the future, don't want to gamble with that. Yeah. So Kenyon Drake, I'm not going to sit here and argue anything against his talent. I'm very high on him. I've tried to trade for him in Dynasty. Really like him as a talent. The one thing that swings it for me is I'd say we've seen a similar amount of sort of them playing at their best from both of these guys between Kenyon Drake and Kareem Hunt. And I actually think that if you put them... I just prefer the talent. I think Kareem Hunt, I would say, is actually, on his day, a more talented back. If you put them both as an RB1 in the same lineup... Wait, Sam. I can see you going again. I personally prefer Kareem Hunt. And I'm looking at this, although it's come out, he likes where he is at Cleveland at the moment, likes what he's getting. If he performs this year, when he gets his opportunities, but doesn't get more, that his role doesn't grow, I could see him getting frustrated. And if the right offer comes across, if his agent starts getting the right kind of, getting wind of a few nice situations for him, I think he's good enough to be a starting running back in the league. There is the off-the-field concerns, which is what makes it really difficult. I just personally am really high on Kareem Hunt, so for me, I'd rather lock him in for 3 years. And that's mainly me basing it off, I think, if he performs at the level I'm hoping he will, and to his peak, he won't be in Cleveland next year.
I agree with
without
that.
Without them putting a stupid investment into him, without him paying him running back 1 money to be a running back 2, which I think they won't do as a franchise.
I agree with that completely. The only thing that I have that I don't necessarily agree with is you said that like you've kind of got a similar sample size for Kareem Hunt and Kenyon Drake in similar situations. I don't think that's true, because Kareem Hunt, you had was it a season and a half in, and then he got his get banned. So you had a season and a half of uninterrupted where Kareem Hunt was on the field and getting a lot of work, and obviously had his great rookie year. And then he came back and he had 8 games where he was looking good with the Chiefs. Now, first of all, he was on the Chiefs, which even then, under Alex Smith, were considered an outside Super Bowl kind of team. Like, they were easily a top 8 or 9 team in the league. And he was getting a lot of work. Kenyon Drake, since he came into the league, when he went to it was Miami, wasn't it, he was at? Mm-hmm. And he was under Gase, and for whatever reason, Gase just did not want to give him work. Gase just wouldn't put him on the field.
That like, I'm disregarding entirely.
And Kenyon Drake would come out, and he might have 1 week where he'd just go off, and he'd be great, and then he'd come back next week, and he'd only get 9% of snaps or something ridiculous. He just wasn't being put on the field, and I think for his first 3 years, I don't think he had more than like 25% of snaps on the field, which is just outrageous, because whenever he gets on the field, he produces. And then finally he gets in Arizona, and finally for those last couple games of the season, he was getting used as almost a feature back, and he was getting carries, and he was performing as a top 4 or 5 running back in the league. Now that was on Arizona, who, yes, they were a much better team last year than they were the year before, but they were still probably a bottom half in the league team.
The only thing I disagree, as much as they were, it's off their defense. They had the worst defense in the league. If you just take the offense into consideration, they're a much better team within the league.
Yes.
I think consider running back production, including what their defense does.
No, I agree. But their offense wasn't. It was actually very patchy. They would have games where they could really get it going, and they would have games where they couldn't. So I think he's got a lot of room to grow in that offense. I think he is the most likely of the three of these running backs to still be with the team he's within them at the moment this time next year, because there's a lot of talk that basically said Cliff Kingsbury was going to go for him this off-season anyway, and that Cliff Kingsbury came in and was like, he's the guy I want. So I think he will get paid. He'll probably get him at a relative value, because he's not got shed tons and shed tons of film. And the other thing to consider is Kareem Hunt might switch position. There is a genuine possibility that he might transition to play more slot receiver than running back, because he's got more of the build for that, and he's very good out the backfield. So I wouldn't be too shocked at that.
Yeah.
We'll see.
I mean, it's just a risk for me taking Hunt there. I think Drake is the safer option. Just to round it off,
100%,
in my opinion.
Drake's a safer option, and I'm not sitting there arguing his talent at all. I'm very high on Drake. Just high on Kareem Hunt as well. He's a bit of a my guy, I guess you could say.
I can't argue with that. As someone who's, I think I've my guide on every single episode thus far.
Yep. Somehow Prochet has gotten into every episode since he was drafted.
Prochet, Perriman, everyone's my guy, not my guy, as the case may be.
Yeah. I was gonna say.
But this is the time, the head-to-head section.
Here we go.
So this is the part of the podcast where I have a little task for the boys, pit them head-to-head. And as we mentioned at the top of the podcast, Matt is currently sitting at 3-0 against Sam. Now, today's head-to-head is very similar to last week's head-to-head, as in it's in the form of a snake draft, where the boys are going to be filling out their roster from a pool of players which I'm going to offer them. And of course, it's going to be a position group at a time. So they get a chance to pick between 4 players at one opportunity. So this week, we're changing up the roster format. Ooh. So we're going for 2 quarterbacks, 2 wide receivers, 2 running backs, 2 tight ends, and 1 DST, defense and special team. Now what I'm going to do for the quarterback room is I'm going to mention 8 names at the start, and we're going to pick all 2 quarterbacks for each of your teams first. So you have a wider pool to select from, but we'll see who gets the better pick.
I can barely remember 4 names when you listed them off, let alone 8.
Right, okay, here we go then. So, I believe, Sam, you picked first last week?
I certainly did.
So I'll give it to Matt this week to pick first. Okay, so to kick us off, in the quarterback room, you are looking at Carl Allen, Jacoby Brissett, Phillip Rivers, Jimmy Garoppolo, Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, Derek Carr, and Jared Goff, all on the board.
And this is all of last season's stats, isn't it?
All of last season for these guys.
Okay.
Right. And it's a right mix. It's in no particular order, so the top 4 aren't higher than the bottom 4. It's a right mix, so there's no way you can guess between how I've read them off either.
Oh, man.
So, Matt, you're on the clock.
Okay, I'm on the clock. Well, I'm thinking through a couple of the big names. Let's run them through again, just to make sure I heard all 8.
Okay, so we've got Kyle Allen, Jacoby Brissett, Phillip Rivers, Jimmy Garoppolo, Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, Derek Carr, and Jared Goff. Those are your 8. And this is based off of last season, 2019, in a PPR format. And every single player that you could pick from today has played 10 games last season.
I'm gonna roll Darnold off the start.
Sam Darnold.
I think that's the right pick, because I think Jared Goff is a bit of a throw out there, because I think he only threw 22 touchdowns last year on something silly like 650 attempts or something. So I'm actually going to go with Derek Carr, I think.
Derek Carr?
Ooh, that was my next pick.
Interesting pick. I like it.
Right, so who are we looking at? Rivers, Jimmy G, Baker, Goff, I think are the names I'm going, like, sort that I'm running with in my head. If it's off last season.
Last season. It's PPR, but doesn't really matter. too
Yeah,
much
on
for
this one, yeah, that's pretty good to it.
quarterbacks.
I'm just quickly looking through this list and just crossing names out of my head of who I would not want.
So you can't overthink it at times as well, you know. Don't want to overthink this one.
I'm actually gonna go off of that list. I'm gonna go
Okay.
Brissett.
Jacoby
So I think
Brissett.
quietly, especially early doors, he was putting up a little bit, but that could be a bad one. But
Mm,
It's not the worst one.
that's all right then. We can take that.
off that list, I'm then going to take Jared Goff.
Not
Yeah.
bad choice.
That
Not
kind
a
of
bad choice at all.
that kind of just suits my draft style. Just
Yeah, I'd agree
Take
with
it.
that. So
Play it
someone's
safe.
got
Play it
after
boring.
two picks, someone's got a clear lead at this point. So
Well, 3-1.
hopefully no tie situation as we had last time.
God.
Oh god, I
Really
can't believe
think on
that
my feet
happened
there.
still.
Right, okay. So moving back through the picks, I believe it should be Sam.
It's my pick next, yeah.
Your
I believe
pick.
so.
Right, running back
Tense,
room. We'll go here.
All
I'm
right.
trying
Yeah.
to build the tension. And you know what? I'll give you 8 names once again.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
like that format. I think run it with that.
No, not gonna flow.
Oh.
I just realised there's a clear top and bottom 4, so there's no way we can do that. So we'll stick with our running back. We'll stick with running back 1 for now. Okay.
Okay.
So the names are Marlon Mack, Damian Williams, James White, and Miles Sanders.
I am going to take. Is it points per game?
Points per game, so that's the average.
Yeah.
Across the games they played. All these have minimum of 10.
I will take Miles Sanders.
Miles Sanders, okay.
I think that might have been the bad decision, but
Matt, who are you thinking?
I mean, there is only one other person to
I'm
take.
gonna go with. I might.
Do you want me to read the names off again?
No. Wrote
You got
them down this time.
Smart.
It's tough. I'll go Damian Williams on the first one.
Damian Williams, okay.
You chose poorly.
We'll see.
Smaller sample size though.
3-0. I'm comfortable.
Less than
can afford to
500
make
rushing
picks.
yards on the season, mate.
We'll
So-
Trust
see.
me, as someone who had Damian Williams, it was not fun.
We'll see. Keep picking.
So-
Come on.
I believe we so there's a snake draft, but I believe actually in the quarterback one it went Matt Sam.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So.
we stick to Sam going first on this one.
Yep.
Okay.
So, and then we'll resort back to Snake after this. So,
Oh wait. In my head, I was thinking we were coming back round for those picks.
Well-
Ah.
I had to throw a curveball out there.
Yep.
Have to keep it fair. Also, you're
Yeah.
3-0 up, Matt. So,
Oh yeah, exactly. It's fine. I
it's-
a big brain myself.
Of course. Right, we'll go for the second running back,
Let's do it.
and the names are Carlos Hyde, Latavius Murray, Raheem Mostert, and Adrian Peterson for the running back 2 slot.
I
Who-
am going to take Carlos Hyde.
Carlos Hyde, interesting.
I think he had
So we had
over 1,000.
Latavius Murray, Adrian Peterson. What was the fourth?
Raheem Mostert,
Right.
San Francisco
Ooh.
49ers.
Yeah, Hyde's. I think I like Hyde as a pick there.
Dun dun
I am gonna go
Dun, dun.
with
dun dun.
Mostert.
Nice. So one of you's picked the highest, one of you's picked the lowest
Oh god.
in that one. I don't know why you're celebrating, Sam.
Mate, I'm confident.
You
That
were
one was
last
Matt.
week.
Oh, God.
You normally are, and then I beat you. That tends to be how things work with us.
And also that Sam, your pick was the worst out of the 2 in that one. So
Oh, no!
See? Man, he's Yipsin. Here we go.
Yeah,
Yips
it's
is in
happening
the
again.
building, boys.
it's happening again.
Oh,
Right,
you
okay.
love
On
to
to
see
the
it.
next one. On to the next
On
one.
to the next one. Right. So Matt finished off that one. So Matt will start this one. So we'll go for wide receiver 1.
Mm-hmm.
And the class for this draft is as follows: Calvin Ridley, DJ Moore, Marvin Jones Jr., and Robert Woods.
Oh, okay.
Nice little selection there.
Okay.
Who do you fancy
nice
out of those
thinking.
names? Calvin Ridley, DJ Moore, Marvin Jones Jr., and Robert Woods.
I'm gonna go Robert Woods.
Robert Woods. All right. Sam.
DJ Moore.
DJ Moore. Very close. Very close. Right, and then we'll snake back round to Sam. You get the shot at wide receiver 2. Okay, the names are Marquise Brown, Mike Williams, Larry Fitzgerald, or Curtis Samuel.
Ooh.
So, definitely wide receiver 2 class.
Jeez, okay.
Do those receivers dirty there, James.
Well, it's just off the basis that the stats aren't as high as ever for, you know?
And for this, points per game, so...
Points per game, PPR, minimum of 10 games per player to be able to be with a chance of being selected.
So it was Curtis Samuel...
Curtis Samuel, Larry Fitzgerald, Mike Williams, Marquise Brown.
I'm going to go Mike Williams.
Mike Williams, okay.
Oh, I'm really between two here. It's kind of open Sam and take one. Let's think.
It's tough.
I'll go Curtis Samuel.
Curtis Samuel.
It's a good pick. It's a good pick, that.
That is incredibly close thus far.
Ooh.
Okay, next one. We'll go for the tight end room.
Mm-hmm.
And again, snake draft. So Matt, you're on the clock now.
Yep.
You've got a choice of Hunter Henry, Dallas Goedert, Jared Cook, and Tyler Higbee. Who of those is
Oh, that's a
taking your
really
fancy?
tough one. I'm gonna. Oh, actually.
It's actually quite a vary in the points than these ones.
Yeah, I was gonna say
it's-
I could see this being a bit all over the place.
It's probably the hardest one out of all the rounds thus far.
Go Jared Cook.
Jared Cook, all right.
So who have I got left? I've got...
So you have got left Hunter Henry, Dallas Goedert, Tyler Higbee.
Dallas Goedert.
Ooh, interesting.
Oh God, isn't it? When he says that, that means there's a point swing.
Yeah. It seems like every time someone picks the lowest, it's strange.
Oh.
It's
In other
quite
words,
scary.
I just picked the lowest.
Yeah, I'll give you that. Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll see that time. But the highest was still on the board.
Okay.
I can let you guess who, but or we can move swiftly on to Titan 2.
Titan 2, let's go.
Let's do
Right,
that one.
Sam, you have a choice
Yep.
of 4 once again. These 4 are Noah Fant, Jonnu Smith, Tyler Eifert, or TJ Hawkinson. Who is taking your fancy from these ones?
Well, TJ Hawkinson's off the board, isn't he?
So once
Oh,
again,
this is really difficult.
Noah Fant, Jonnu Smith, Tyler Eifert, or TJ Hawkinson. And now, actually, this one is an incredibly tight round.
Oh, so they're all quite close.
This one's quite close.
I was going to say, because there's no name jumping out as being way ahead of the rest. Within
Yeah,
the slot.
so it's
Jonnu Smith.
Jonnu Smith. Wow, okay, straight in there. Straight in there.
I'm doing it.
With
Right.
10 games played, you said at least.
10 games
yeah.
minimum.
Yeah.
To be honest, with you, all of these played 16, apart from TJ Hawkinson, who played 12. So
I don't think you could say played 12. I think he actually played 2.
well, this is
He was
not
present.
game started.
He was present
Yeah,
at 12.
I
I think he only played 2.
I'll go.
Don't let that swing your decision.
I'll
That's
go
all I'm saying.
Eifert for this one.
Tyler Eifert. Alrighty.
That's a good,
Good pick.
shift. That's
Good
a good
pick.
shift.
Okay, and then moving on to our last pick of the draft, which is DST. And I have not made it easy for you this time.
Oh, brilliant.
So, arguably the top 4 teams last year: Detroit Lions, Cincinnati Bengals, New York Giants, and Oakland Raiders.
Oh.
And that was a joke with the top 4 because they were
I was gonna
around about
say.
the bottom 4. So, Matt, you're on the clock.
Right, so hang on, do we
Who
have Lions, Giants.
Bengals and Raiders.
Oh, man. Ooh. Lions, Giants, Bengals, Raiders. Right. I am gonna go. I'm I'm gonna go with the Raiders.
Raiders. Sam,
Well, I wanted that one.
I was going to say,
Oh,
you sound
okay.
disappointed.
Yeah.
I am then going to take. Who do I? So this basically comes down to. I think the Bengals are out because I think they probably just conceded the most points. They were just a bad team all round last year.
DST, remember?
Yeah, I think they conceded a lot of points. They didn't put up many points. They were just terrible. I'm basically trying to think of who do I think would have scored more field goals and conceded less points between the Lions and I'm going to go with the Lions because I'm going to say they're the slightly better defense.
That was my second.
I thought you'd have backed your own team there, Sam, but
Not with their defense.
Can't go
And
against
if-
Patricia. Yeah.
Don't tell me it's a tie.
it's not a tie.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
That's fine. At least we got a result.
But if Sam backed his team there, it would have been a tie.
Ah!
It's a difference of 0.1 points in it. So, as you can probably guess, Matt, you have once again smashed it. 4-0, the
4-0,
winner of this
baby.
week.
4-0,
scored-
baby. Here
You
we
scored
go.
101.5 points.
Four.
Sam, 101.4. Now, from the early rounds, Sam, you were winning quite heavily. And then we came through to the tight ends. And the Jared Cook pick really helped you out there, Matt.
Yep.
Over Dallas Goedert. Like I say, Dallas Goedert was the worst pick in that one. Sam, if you picked Hunter Henry, you'd been with a great shout.
Can I ask quickly,
Yeah.
on the running back bit,
Yep.
if I'd have gone James White, would that have been a better pick?
So you picked up who
Williams.
did you pick? Damian Williams. James White was the better pick. Damian Williams was actually the worst out of the four.
I don't know why. in
Miles
my
Sanders
head,
was the best.
I was playing it off of thinking it was coming back round, and like I'll take White a third, and I don't know why I was trying to overthink it with that. So well, still got
It's
the
tough.
win. That's
It's
fine.
tough.
Oh.
Yeah, I can't argue that.
Mate, it could be worse. We've heard of
Could be
better
five.
We've heard of better comebacks. I mean, the Patriots were down 28-3, so
You're the Patriots. Yeah?
I
Yeah,
can put it back.
I don't
I
remember
can
the
put it
Patriots
back.
having the yips.
I
That's
can
all
pull
I'm
it back
saying.
from
The
4-0.
Patriots
I can
perform
pull it
under
back.
pressure.
Mate, you lost it on the last two rounds. That's all it is.
Well, we'll
Clutch-
just see.
clutched up,
We'll have to.
clutched
We'll have to.
up.
We'll have to see what I can do next week. I'm confident.
Yeah,
you
that is
were
true.
partway through that,
Yeah, you were smashing.
You
that
were
was losing
very
quite
confident.
heavily.
and
quite
you were very
heavily.
confident. You were letting me know about it. You were letting me know how confident you were.
Anyway, something about like and subscribe and.
No, I'm happy to talk
Follow
about you.
Yeah,
you-
I think
you
this
losing
is
week,
what
but-
people are
Out
here
there or
for.
something, is it?
But yeah, maybe that is a good idea. Maybe we should
Yeah.
wrap it up here. So, as Sam has alluded to there, please go out and check our YouTube channel at the Brit Iron. Go like, comment, and subscribe. Is this
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
There we go. I got it right this week.
Right next to you, mate. Right next to you.
Wait, there.
Yeah, right next to you.
Oh, there. Okay, right. Yeah.
Mhm.
Go like, comment, subscribe. Also check us out on Twitter and Instagram. We're at the Brit Iron. Got some great content going down on both of those channels. So go get involved. And obviously, Listen League is being set up as we speak. We're looking to do the draft in the next week or two. I
Yeah,
believe
in the coming
Yeah.
weeks, I think we've
Yeah,
got.
there'll be-
starts.
There'll be content galore on the way, so
Exactly.
keep an eye
So,
out for that.
Keep your eyes peeled. But for now, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.